Book 3, Chapter 14. The young actress was led to and left alone in a chamber adorned with all the luxurious and half-Eastern taste that at one time characterized the palaces of the great Signores of Italy. Her first thought was for Zanoni. Was he yet living? Had he escaped unscathed the blades of the foe? Her new treasure, the new light of her life, her lord, at last her lover. She had short time for reflection. She heard steps approaching the chamber. She drew back, but trembled not. A courage not of herself, never known before, sparkled in her eyes and dilated her stature. Living or dead, she would be faithful still to Zanoni. There was a new motive to the preservation of honor. The door opened, and the prince entered in the gorgeous and gaudy costume still worn at that time in Naples. "Fair and cruel one," said he, advancing with a half-sneer upon his lip, "thou wilt not too harshly blame the violence of love." He attempted to take her hand as he spoke. "Nay," said he, as she recoiled, "reflect that thou art now in the power of one that never faltered in the pursuit of an object less dear to him than thou art. Thy lover, presumptuous though he be, is not by to save thee. Mine thou art, but instead of thy master, suffer me to be thy slave." "Prince," said Viola, with a stern gravity, "your boast is in vain. Your power, I am not in your power. Life and death are in mine own hands. I will not defy, but I do not fear you. I feel, and in some feelings," added Viola, with a solemnity almost thrilling, "there is all the strength and all the divinity of knowledge. I feel that I am safe even here. But you, Prince, have brought danger to your home and hearth." The Neapolitan seemed startled by an earnestness and boldness he was but little prepared for. He was not, however, a man easily intimidated or deterred from any purpose he had formed, and approaching Viola, he was about to reply with much warmth, real or affected, when a knock was heard at the door of the chamber. The sound was repeated, and the prince, chafed at the interruption, opened the door and demanded impatiently who had ventured to disobey his orders and invade his leisure. Mascari presented himself, pale and agitated. "My lord," said he, in a whisper, "pardon me, but a stranger is below who insists on seeing you, and, from some words he let fall, I judged it advisable even to infringe your commands." "A stranger, and at this hour? What business can he pretend? Why was he even admitted?" "He asserts that your life is in imminent danger. The source whence it proceeds he will relate to your excellency alone." The prince frowned, but his color changed. He mused a moment, and then, re-entering the chamber and advancing towards Viola, he said, "Believe me, fair creature, I have no wish to take advantage of my power. I would fain trust alone to the gentler authorities of affection. Hold yourself queen within these walls more absolutely than you have ever enacted that part on the stage. Tonight, farewell. May your sleep be calm, and your dreams propitious to my hopes." With these words he retired, and in a few moments Viola was surrounded by officious attendants, whom she at length, with some difficulty, dismissed, and refusing to retire to rest, she spent the night in examining the chamber, which she found was secured, and in thoughts of Zanoni, in whose power she felt an almost preternatural confidence. Meanwhile, the prince descended the stairs and sought the room into which the stranger had been shown. He found the visitor wrapped from head to foot in a long robe, half gown, half mantle, such as was sometimes worn by ecclesiastics. The face of this stranger was remarkable. So sunburnt and swarthy were his hues that he must, apparently, have derived his origin among the races of the farthest east. His forehead was lofty, and his eyes so penetrating, yet so calm in their gaze, that the prince shrank from them as we shrink from a questioner who is drawing forth the guiltiest secrets of our hearts. "What would you with me? asked the prince, motioning his visitor to a seat. "Prince," said the stranger, in a voice deep and sweet, but foreign in its accent, "son of the most energetic and masculine race that ever applied godlike genius to the service of human will, with its winding wickedness and its stubborn grandeur, descendant of the great Visconti, in whose chronicles lies the history of Italy in her palmy day, and in whose rise was the development of the mightiest intellect, ripened by the most relentless ambition. I come to gaze upon the last star in a darkening firmament. By this hour tomorrow space shall know it not. Man, unless thy whole nature change, thy days are numbered." "What means this jargon?" said the prince, in visible astonishment and secret awe. "Comest thou to menace me in my own halls, or wouldst thou warn me of a danger? Art thou some itinerant mountebank, or some unguessed-of friend? Speak out, and plainly, what danger threatens me?" "Zanoni and thy ancestor's sword," replied the stranger. "Ha, ha!" said the prince, laughing scornfully. "I half suspected thee from the first. Thou art then the accomplice or the tool of that most dexterous, but at present defeated, charlatan. And I suppose thou wilt tell me that if I were to release a certain captive I have made, the danger would vanish, and the hand of the dial would be put back." "Judge of me as thou wilt, prince. I confess my knowledge of Zanoni. Thou, too, wilt know his power, but not till it consume thee. I would save, therefore I warn thee. Dost thou ask me why? I will tell thee. Canst thou remember to have heard wild tales of thy grandsire, of his desire for a knowledge that passes that of the schools and cloisters, of the strange man from the East who was his familiar and master in lore against which the Vatican has, from age to age, launched its mimic thunder? Dost thou call to mind the fortunes of thy ancestor, how he succeeded in youth to little but a name, how, after a career wild and dissolute as thine, he disappeared from Milan, a pauper and a self-exile, how, after years spent, none knew in what climes or in what pursuits, he again revisited the city where his progenitors had reigned, how with him came the wise man of the East, the mystic Mejnour, how they who beheld him beheld with amaze and fear that time had ploughed no furrow on his brow, that youth seemed fixed, as by a spell, upon his face and form. Dost thou not know that from that hour his fortunes rose? Kinsmen the most remote died. Estate upon estate fell into the hands of the ruined noble. He allied himself with the royalty of Austria. He became the guide of princes, the first magnate of Italy. He found anew the house of which thou art the last lineal upholder, and transferred his splendor from Milan to the Sicilian realms. Visions of high ambition were then present with him nightly and daily. Had he lived, Italy would have known a new dynasty, and the Visconti would have reigned over Magna Graecia. He was a man such as the world rarely sees, but his ends, too earthly, were at war with the means he sought. Had his ambition been more or less, he had been worthy of a realm mightier than the Caesars swayed, worthy of our solemn order, worthy of the fellowship of Mejnour, whom you now behold before you." The prince, who had listened with deep and breathless attention to the words of his singular guest, started from his seat at the last words. "Impostor!" he cried. "Can you dare thus to play with my credulity? 60 years have flown since my grandsire died. Were he living, he had passed his 120th year, and you, whose age is erect and vigorous, have the assurance to pretend to have been his contemporary. But you have imperfectly learned your tale. You know not, it seems, that my grandsire, wise and illustrious indeed, in all save his faith in a charlatan, was found dead in his bed, in the very hour when his colossal plans were ripe for execution, and that Mejnour was guilty of his murder."
"Alas," answered the stranger, in a voice of great sadness,
Had he but listened to Mejnour, had he but delayed the last and most perilous ordeal of daring wisdom until the requisite training and initiation had been completed, your ancestor would have stood with me upon an eminence which the waters of death itself wash everlastingly, but cannot overflow. Your grandsire resisted my fervent prayers, disobeyed my absolute commands, and in the sublime rashness of a soul that panted for secrets, which he who desires orbs and scepters never can obtain, perished the victim of his own frenzy.
He was poisoned, and Mejnour fled.
Mejnour fled not,
answered the stranger proudly.
Mejnour could not fly from danger, for to him danger is a thing long left behind. It was the day before the Duke took the fatal draught, which he believed was to confer on the mortal the immortal boon, that finding my power over him was gone, I abandoned him to his doom. But a truce with this. I loved your grandsire. I would save the last of his race. Oppose not thyself to Zanoni. Yield not thy soul to thine evil passions. Draw back from the precipice while there is yet time. In thy front and in thine eyes I detect some of that diviner glory which belonged to thy race. Thou hast in thee some germs of their hereditary genius, but they are choked up by worse than thy hereditary vices. Recollect that by genius thy house rose, by vice it ever failed to perpetuate its power. In the laws which regulate the universe, it is decreed that nothing wicked can long endure. Be wise, and let history warn thee. Thou standest on the verge of two worlds, the past and the future. The voices from either shriek omen in thy ear. I have done. I bid thee farewell.
Not so. Thou shalt not quit these walls. I will make experiment of thy boasted power. What, ho there, ho! The prince shouted. The room was filled with his minions. Seize that man, he cried, pointing to the spot which had been filled by the form of Mejnour. To his inconceivable amaze and horror, the spot was vacant. The mysterious stranger had vanished like a dream, but a thin and fragrant mist undulated in pale volumes round the walls of the chamber. "Looks to my lord!" cried Mascari. The prince had fallen to the floor, insensible. For many hours he seemed in a kind of trance. When he recovered, he dismissed his attendants, and his step was heard in his chamber, pacing to and fro with heavy and disordered strides. Not till an hour before his banquet the next day did he seem restored to his wonted self.